Afternoon, everyone. I'm extremely sorry there were some technical glitches, but thank you all for attending the webinar. And please I would request all of you to tell me like whether you are able to hear us or not. If there's some problem, please type in the chat window and we'll check it. Okay, so now let's start. Uh, I'm Gunjan Garg, Customer Relationship Executive at EmployWise, and I welcome you all to our HR at EmployWise webinar series, and I thank you all for taking out time out of your busy schedule and attending our webinar. And today I have with me Sarabjit Kaur, who is Functional Consultant at EmployWise, who would be discussing on the topic ingredients of a good travel and expense policy. Now, before I start, I would like to inform the participants that we have a question and answer session at the end of the webinar. And any questions you have, you can type in the chat window, which is on the right hand side of the screen. So I guess we can just start the presentation before any delays. I hand over the presentation to Sarabjit.
Good afternoon, everyone. Let us talk about travel and expense policy. Usually, we consider as a term, but there is a lot more to it than just being a term.
Okay, Sarabjit, I need to interrupt you. I got to know that the sound is very low. I would request you all to let me know that are you able to hear us? I hope now you're able to hear us. You can confirm me. I hope the volume is clear now. Okay, so now let's start again. I welcome you all to HR at EmployWise webinar series. I'm your host, Gunjan Garg, Customer Relationship Executive at EmployWise. Today I have with me Sarabjit Kaur, who's Functional Consultant at EmployWise and would be discussing on the topic ingredients of a good travel and expense policy. So before we start, I would like to inform the participants that we would be having a question and answer session after the webinar, in which you can type in your questions in the chat pane appearing on the right hand side of your screen. And so I would like to now hand over the presentation to Sarabjit.
Thanks, Gunjan. Good afternoon, everyone. Let us talk about today's travel and expense policy. Usually, we consider it as a policy. We know it as an employee. We make it, develop it as an HR. But there are a lot more things that we need to take into consideration while creating a policy. So today, I'm going to discuss what could be the possible ingredients while formulating a travel and expense policy. The term best in class is frequently heard in travel, but what does it mean and how can we apply it to a creation or revision of a travel and expense policy? Travel and expense policy that everyone must be using, and they know what are their entitlements and how much they will get for a particular expense type and all. But how do we create that efficiently? The truth is there cannot be any uniform definition of a best-in-class policy because what is appropriate for one organization is not necessarily appropriate for another. Simply put together, one size does not fit at all. There are three guiding principles that can help create a travel and expense policy that satisfies business and cultural needs, as well as six elements that form the foundation of a strong travel management program. Taken together, these guiding principles and travel and expense policy elements will ensure the creation of a travel and expense policy that is best in Now, let's start by discussing the three guiding principles of a travel and expense policy. The three guiding principles, one is maximizing savings to the organization while simultaneously improving or at least maintaining. We can have a blend of both as well. Second is satisfaction, and third is productivity. Organizations must determine the appropriate mix to satisfy their business requirements and corporate culture, as changes in any one of these areas will have an immediate impact on the others. Policy-related measures taken in an attempt to hold down travel and expense costs are among the most effective cost control steps taken by many organizations. The single most important step organizations can undertake is to develop more explicit travel and expense policies and implement more consistent enforcement measures. Tackling the travel and expense policy offers organizations with all the levels of spending volume an important opportunity to reduce their travel and expense costs. Organizations have only chances to exercise control over any given travel and expense expenditure. The first opportunity which comes into picture is before the expense has been incurred, involves the development of a travel and expense policy. This is simply a matter of exercising control by letting travelers know the ground rules. The second control opportunity is the point at which prices are determined. This can occur at the time reservations are made. For example, the airline tickets, hotel rooms, car rental, or any point of sale. The third control opportunity involves the usage of comprehensive and efficient payment methods that verify actual costs and collect the data from various vendors like bookers and all. The fourth and the last chance an organization has to control and reduce travel expense is that at that time expense reports are audited and processed for payment. Developing a comprehensive policy is the first opportunity a company has to control travel and expense expenditure. A travel and expense policy serves as a cornerstone for any travel management program by clearly outlining the procedures related to business-related travel expenditures. These elements are the starting point and the foundation for our best practices, proven efficient methods, and the strategies. Now, moving ahead, what are the 6 elements of a travel and expense policy? To start with, there are 6 basic C's of a travel and expense policy. First being culture, then content, comprehensiveness, communication, control, and compliance. Let's have a look at each one by one.
Okay, sir, like I have a question at this point, like how culture impacts travel and expense policy, because generally people don't relate culture to, travel and expense policy. So how does this fit into this travel and expense policy?
Gunjan, in our organization, what kind of culture we follow? That is a relaxed culture. That means there are internal cash advances issued, right? Central or direct bills are utilized for employees' travel. Travelers can book their own air class services, and you have preferred vendors. I mean, there is no restriction from company side. This way, the relaxed culture actually impacts a lot while making or formulating a travel expense policy. Wherein in some organizations there is a restrictive culture, where if there is no internal cash advances, you spend it on your own, then you get reimbursed for the same.
Okay.
So this way culture also impacts what kind of policy it will be. Now, moving ahead, an organization's culture is reflected in all of its operating policies and procedures, including its business travel and expense policy. Corporate culture is a critical link to each one of the 5 key elements. Decision makers in travel and expense are required to have an intuitive grasp of their company's culture. Travel management requires a deliberate balancing act between potential savings and a company's status. Issues that may impact corporate culture are those that can affect an employee's comfort or convenience level while traveling. Any changes to corporate culture require strong and visible support from senior management. There could be relaxed culture or restrictive culture. In relaxed cultures, internal cash advances are issued, while in restrictive, there are no internal cash advances. In relaxed, use of preferred vendors is not required, while in restricted, corporate sponsored travel and expense vendors are there, and you have to go for the bookings only through them. In relaxed culture, there is travelers can book any class of air service, railways, whatever is convenient. While in restrictive culture, clear class of service and lowest logical airfare guidelines are usually there. In relaxed culture, central and direct bills are utilized for employee travel, while in restrictive cultures, employees are required to book all the reservations through decided travel agencies by the company only. Then there is no restriction on the size of rental vehicles or class of hotel accommodation, wherein visible visible senior management support and enforcement of principles is also not there in relaxed culture, and that is there in restrictive one. Forced principles are there. Now moving ahead to the next C, that is content. The success of a travel and expense policy lies on the topics addressed. Critical topics need to be included in order to maximize the effectiveness of the policy. Travelers need to know what management expectations are. A travel and expense policy should cover information on each component of travel and expense spending, as this will ensure that travelers understand management's expectations on all the components of business travel. Now, what could be the content, essential content? First one is general issues like purpose of the travel policy, then scope of the travel policy, enforcement of the travel policy, and responsibilities who are part of this travel policy. Then, other content may include the travel arrangements, air travel, lodging, cars, rental, other transportation, payment methods, documentation, expense reporting, communication of expenses, group and travel meetings, meals and entertainment, other expenses, purpose of travel and expense, how their payments will be made, how they will report the expense, what will be the approval process or workflow, and how the process of billing will take place. These all incorporated in one policy form the good travel and expense policy. Now, the content also depends upon the positives or things derived from the first part, C, that is culture. Based upon the culture, the content is decided. You may have various employee types like trainees, like permanent employees, regular employees, based upon the differentiation of various entitlements can be done. Another way could be the designations or the grades of the employees based upon which these entitlements can be defined. The approval workflows and the payment method again depends upon organization to organization, but it should be smooth and it should be clear. So that there should not be any problem for the employees who are spending out of their pocket and they are getting reimbursed the expenses very late. Content is measured on the number of topics that need to be addressed in the travel and expense policy. A travel and expense policy is incomplete if the travel and expense policy is missing any of the essential points that have been mentioned. Now, let's move to the next C, that is comprehensiveness. The success of any organization's travel and expense policy not only lies in the topics included, but also on the level of comprehensiveness with each topic. If all the details are not clearly defined in the travel and expense policy, travelers will not understand the company's expectations, which are driven from the creation or formulation of that policy. A travel and expense policy is incomplete if it is missing on enforcement language, frequent flyer programs, instructions and processes, designated travel agency usage, preferred suppliers and rates, car rental guidelines, travel agency contract information, expectations from executives, preferred call preferred car rental supplier, airline class of service, approved payment methods, size limit of rental vehicle, lowest logical airfare parameters, specific and appropriate documentation, tax documentation requirements, preferred air carrier details, hotel class and room type, alternate transportation, emergency travel assistance, group and meeting travel, converting foreign currencies, en route travel arrangements, corporate card program benefits, traveler reimbursement process, use of private charter aircraft, cash advance issuance criteria, meals and entertainment, spending limits, rail travel, cash advance limits, requirements, travel safety tips, electronic ticketing procedures, VAT reclaim, i- issuance criteria, car rental issuance, traveler profit profiles, hotel cancellation, car rental refueling, corporate cards, expense reporting, telecom expenses, and receipt level. Comprehensiveness is the degree of detail provided under each of 12 critical policy components. It gives travelers and expense approvers the information needed to follow the travel and expense policy and control expenses. It ensures a tangible record of all the ongoing travel management objectives. Now we'll move to the next C, that is communication. Somebody has said it correctly. Spread the word. Improve communication methods and obtain senior management support. Even a meticulously crafted policy cannot deliver savings if travelers are not familiar with it and its contents. So it's good to be on the same page with all the parties who are involved for execution of this travel and expense policy. Be it all the travel arrangers, bookers, agencies, payables or auditors, all appropriate parties online, all expense approvers, all the employees who come into the criteria for this travel and expense policy, all newly hired employees, because for them it is very important to understand the travel and expense policy. Communication also measures the extent of travel and expense policies distribution, how the travel and expense policy is distributed, how often the travel and expense policy is updated, traveler awareness and knowledge of travel expense policies also through communication. Now moving to the next thing, that is control. Travel and expense policy control is the muscle behind every corporate travel and expense policy. It strengthens and the effectiveness of specific policy language. It is the methods in place for monitoring compliance is also measured by control. Control measures enforcement strategies used in dealing with non-compliance. Now, when can we say that a travel and expense policy is exerting minimal control? When travelers are not required to use preferred air, hotel or car rental vendors. Reimbursement is allowed for expenses outside of the travel and expense policy. Use of corporate card is not mandated. Travelers are not required to submit appropriate receipts. Travel is not considered to be one designated travel agency. An automated pre-trip auditing system is not in place. The act or process of a compliant to a desire, demand or proposal, conformity in fulfilling official requirements is through control only. Now, moving ahead to the next C, that is compliance. Once a company has developed and communicated its travel and expense policy, a key question still remains, are travelers complying with it? All imposed restrictions must be monitored for traveler compliance, as non-compliance results in higher than necessary costs. It is important to keep in mind that simply having a formal travel and expense policy is not enough. Policies must be reviewed regularly, clearly communicated to employees, and consistently enforced. What are the key opportunities to achieve travel compliance policy? Use of designated agency for hotel and car rental reservations, submission of appropriate receipts for every expenses that has been claimed, use of preferred air, hotel and car rental vendors, submission of expenses reports within encouraged time frame, use of corporate sponsored payment methods, staying within the hotel and meal spending guidelines, use of appropriate class of air services. These could be the various key opportunities wherein you can achieve the policy compliances. It is important that these compliances are met for the proper execution of travel and expense policy. Studies also show that on average, how much of all expenses are reported. Expense reports include how many instances of non-compliance to policy and about how many of all expense reports that come into travel accounting department have to be sent back for clarification or additional support. But the key opportunities, if they are in place, then this thing can be handled in a proper manner. Non-compliance frequently occurs because policies are not explicitly defined. So it has to be defined and this thing should be taken care into content part. Now moving ahead to policy summary. When a travel and expense policy reflects the company's culture, contains all recommended topics and is comprehensive, effectively communicated and exerts a high level of control, it creates synergy, resulting in a high level of traveler compliance. To achieve a higher level of control and greater degree of compliance, the travel and expense policy must be strictly enforced. More and more organizations are implementing an automated process to effectively monitor and audit travel and expense policy compliances. Now, moving ahead to the benefits of this 6 C's and implementing a travel and expense policy with this 6 C's. It increases the effectiveness of implementation of travel and expense policy. That means in one go you can implement for all. Then improved compliances will result in lower direct travel and expense costs. It can also be used for preferred vendors. They will be maximized and you can reap benefits out of that. Market share commitments can also be met through that. Cost reduction is another factor. Then comprehensive management reporting from your designated travel agency and corporate card vendor will be used for monitoring, budgeting and forecasting the expenses for travel. So in a way, it helps the company for proper review at the end of the year. Now moving ahead, I would like to summarize all the points that we have discussed from the start of formulating a travel policy to its execution. First is understand the company culture and requirement. We need to understand the company culture and requirement, and based upon that we can have a feedback from employees and other employees and management, and then decide upon formulating that policy. Then once we are done with this exercise, then comes deciding upon the contents of travel policy. Prepare a policy manual that covers all the guidelines for employee travel. For this should also include all the entitlements well defined for different parameters, like the way we discussed in content, employee types, designations, grades, etc. And various travel heads under which they can go, air or bus or railways, or for 5-star hotel to 3-star hotel or guest houses and all. Then we need to detail the entire process. Entire process means defining clear entitlement for every employee, what will be the process of approval for expenses, if they are required to submit the bills and all, then the proper bills and receipts, such kind of things should be clear, so that there should not be any case wherein you need to return that expense when the final auditing is happening for rechecking and all. So proper detailing of everything should be there. Then include acceptable price ranges and acceptable costs. It should be like having analysis of the cost, because there could be various costs depending upon various cities or the kind of work for which traveling is done. So it has to be decided, and the ranges should be acceptable and proper. Then comes communication of the policy to all the employees. Once you have formulated the policy, it should be very clear in employees' mind. So there should not be any further hitches or like problems once you have implemented this policy. Once you have implemented this policy, that does not mean that our work is done. We need to review the policy time on time. We can decide different dates upon which we can have a review at the policy. For example, when we decide policy for conveyance and we define rates, 3 rupees per kilometer or 5 rupees per kilometer for car or 3 rupees for bike, etc. Then probably when the petrol prices, there is a hike in petrol prices, probably we need to review that rate and we need to increase or decrease as per the requirement of market. So proper review and timely review is required for travel and expense policy. Now, moving ahead with the other point, once we had decided that there is some change required because of XYZ reasons, we need to redefine the policy or correct that thing. It could be based upon your entitlement. It could be like increasing the rates like this. So we need to redefine the policy. Once we have done this correction, then we need to communicate the same effectively to the employees. Herein, there should be one effective date through which this change is going to be applicable and with reasons. On timely basis, because employees are the ones who are traveling, they know what are the expenses they are incurring because of maybe in Delhi they are incurring more expenses and in Hyderabad their expenses are different for the same thing. So probably we need to take continuous feedback because there is no end to improvement or correcting the policy as per the requirement. Yeah, change is a never-ending process. So this way we can actually implement the travel and expense policy in various organizations. Thank you everybody. We can have a question and answer session wherein you can type in your questions in the chat window. We'll take one question at a time and answer those questions. Okay, Sarab, we have a question here. Like, what should be the travel and expense policy for marketing personnel as they are generally on the field? Because the sales and marketing people keep on traveling, right? So the policy should be very well defined, right? It should also include a lot of varieties from the travel to stay to food and beverages, then other trips like entertainment, meals, etc. And there could be other expenses of internet, stationery for phone, etc. So it should be well defined. It can be based upon the number of days they stay outside, right? So while you are formulating the policy, one more thing is there. Policy could vary when you are in a metro city or in a non-metro city. So there could be various policies based upon these cities. We need to take care of two things while formulating policies for marketing people. One, the variation will be large. One is on field work in A city today, and another day is on field work on B city. So there has to be processed in a way that this movement should flow correctly. Another thing, that guidelines should be clear, and while formulating the policy where there are more field work and employees are traveling a lot, there could be some other things which need to be taken care because they are traveling a lot, and advance is another part which needs to be taken care. Somebody is traveling for 1 month continuously from A city to B city, then probably it's not good that he is spending all the money from his pocket. So it's good to have limits of advance for sales people who are more on field work. Probably again on designation or employee type, we can formulate a policy that this employee type or this designation is entitled for this much advance. If there could be some reasons because of which deviations may occur, then they also needs to be approved with special approval in this case. So we can take care of these points in the policy to have a to adjust the things for marketing and sales people.
In relation to, I think this question only, we have a query like what points should be considered for categorization of cities? Like you mentioned, categorization of cities also depends.
Yes, but of course, if somebody is traveling to a metro city, right, the expenses will be more. If you go to Delhi, Mumbai, Bangalore, Hyderabad, Chennai, expenses are going to be more. If you have business plans to expand your, expand your business in small cities also, probably then the categorization should be different, right? So you can have categorizations of probably metro and non-metro, or you can have categorization of A, B, and C, wherein A also includes the larger cities of country. B includes the cities which are pretty much developed, and in between smaller cities and the larger cities. And the third one could be C. So probably if I talk about uh, cities like uh, Chandigarh and all, they can be in city category B, and Delhi, Mumbai and all, they can be in city category A. You can have smaller cities. For example, if we talk about right now in Haryana, Kurukshetra and all, they can be taken into city category C. There could be various, based upon your business, you can actually, where the frequent travel is, you can pick up those cities and define and have an idea of the expenses incurred on stay, travel, etc., and put them in various city categories. It can be any numbers, A, B, C, D, E, F. Another question is, can you share some benchmarks of travel and expense policy in some of the companies? Well, without naming them, yes. There are companies, for example, recently for one company, we implemented travel and expense. So in October itself, they have this restructuring happening for that policy, wherein as per the grade, they will increase the entitlement for stay. They have categorization of city categories in A, B, and C, wherein the larger cities are put into A category and the relatively smaller cities in B, and the rest of the cities in C category. Now, what they did was to enhance the entitlements of the stay from 1,000 to 12,000 bucks. So this will enhance it. Another thing that happened with that policy was they have this 3 kilometers, three rupees per kilometer for bike traveling for local conveyance. They increased it to 5 rupees for bike, and again for cars from 5 rupees to they went on to 8 rupees. This largely depends upon the fuel prices hiking. So this is one thing. Apart from that, this company belongs to the health this is in a health organization. Then going to one electronics company, wherein they have this policy of, uh, uh, it's a large organization, so they don't actually differentiate upon designations and all. They do have the same policy, wherein the employees are free to go for bookings and all, and they are encouraged to go for the lease bookings. And they have this health center which supports them for booking and all. They have this contract for the bookers, but there is no hard and fast rule that you have to go for bookings from these only. But probably from them they can get cheaper flight rates and all. So this is another thing wherein complete flexibility is there in terms of bookings and stay, etc. Another question is, what may be the time for the enforcement of a policy? You have a cultural idea of the organization, you have a proper feedback from the employees, you formulate a policy, you go through it, you go through proper review of the policy, you make sure that all the ingredients of the policy are in proper blend, and they do meet the criteria of saving cost, employee support, and plus easy and smooth process. So when you make when you think that that all the criteria are being met, then you can decide upon one date, right? And you can implement the policy. For example, for the policies who are currently running in organizations, like right, what they do whenever these changes are supposed to happen, a change effective date is decided. For example, there is no fixed date for that, decide that you want to do this change because of the prices rate hike and all. So you decide a date that you have done all the things before that, and you have decided a date that from 1st of October this policy is going to be implemented. So probably you have a communication to all the employees and all the parties who are going to be involved in that, and you communicate the same that from 1st of October this policy will be applicable. So all the expenses and travel which are coming before that will be covered under this, and after that will be done through new revised rates. Well, there is another question. What should be the suggestions, either fixed charges or headway? See, fixed charges, I do have a constraint for that. Reason being, if you are traveling to one city, right, and you incur, for example, 350 rupees, then if the charges are fixed, you will get 500. If your entitlement is fixed, 500, you will get 500. If your entitlement is, even if you spend 700 bucks, still because your entitlement is 500 fixed, you'll get 500. So fixed is, in my personal opinion, fixed is not good. It should be like maximum of this, uh, the proper word. The maximum we can define. Headwise entitlements are usually not followed. There are some exceptions because of many reasons, but these are few. In general, there should be proper parameters based upon which the entitlements have to be defined. It could be your designation. For a same designation, the employees should be given equal benefits, or it could be grade or employee type also. Probably for trainees, you may have a different policy, or probably for regular employees, because they have spent these number of years in the company. So probably their expense entitlement may vary. In a way, not expense entitlement, but yeah, they can be given more privileges for traveling through air in business class or something like this.
Here we have another question, like what are the industry standards when we talk about per diem inclusions?
Well, in this case, it usually depends upon, it is a fixed amount. In mostly organizations where I have seen for travel and expense implementation, that it is a fixed amount for they define. But again, on basis upon grades or designation, this is defined that for this. And also city category is also taken into care while defining these. So based upon all these criteria, they do define a fixed entitlement for it. And this entitlement could vary. It could be any amount, but it has to be fixed. The question, can you share the current travel policy? Well, because of privacy reasons, we cannot share any of the client's travel policy. But yes, I can actually give you an idea of what comprises of that policy. First one is the scope of the policy, that this is applicable, for example, to sales employee or marketing employees. They have this department-wise segregation, right? Then within the sales department, you have grade levels, for example, A1, A2, A3, and B1, B2, B3. So what you do, you define entitlements within one. For A1, you define it for example, this grade A1 employee type permanent is applicable for travel through bus and railways. then not from air. Then you define the entitlement of stay. For city categories, you have, suppose you have metro and non-metro. So you define for metro city categories, the stay entitlement for hotel is maximum up to 1500 rupees. Then for city category B, you have this stay for uh, hotel. Then you define it for some guest house. You define for friends and relatives. You don't pay, or you pay some minimal amount for that. So you define this for stay. Then comes the conveyance, where you are, when you are traveling, you define various things for conveyance. Whether it will be based upon number rate, 5 rupees per kilometer, something like this. And another thing could be you pay maximum up to maximum amount. And another thing is you pay on actuals conveyance. Then comes food and beverages. You can have different entitlements for that as well, based upon city categories. Then comes the other expenses, for example, your phone, stationery, internet, etc. So usually you have for internet, etc. Companies do uh, pay on number of times in a month. For example, so there are some expenses which are paid based upon this, that you can be paid twice in a month or thrice in a month. These are the expenses for client. You take a client out for dinner or something like this. So these kind of expenses are taken care into number of times in a month. Then they also define policy that limit is fixed for a month. You get 100 rupees for photocopy in a month, or you get 100 rupees for a stationery for a month when you are traveling. So in a way, a policy may have various variations in terms of applicability, plus in terms of the way it is applied. Number of times could be a criteria. Actual amount is paid on actual, maximum amount definition, then fixed amount definition. It could be fixed in a month, in a time, or in a quarter, you can say. It could be number of times in a month, in a quarter, or in a year. So there are various things based upon which we can define a policy.
Any more questions? We are still have 5 to 10 minutes to go ahead. So any more questions? Otherwise, we can wrap up the session. I guess we have no more questions. So I would like to thank you all for taking our time and attending our webinar. You can write into me for any suggestions, any feedback, or any webinar you would like us to conduct, any of the topics you want to share with us. And you can write into me at gunjan.garg@employwise.com. And you can also access our webinars and other HR resources at our site at www.employwise.com/caschr.html. Plus, I would be, as I had got many requirements for the slide decks, I would be mailing our slide decks link to you, where you can access our previous webinar slide decks as well. So once again, thank you from me and Sarabjit for attending this session, and thanks a lot.